a la interpretación, en la parte inferior de su pantalla vas a ver un icono de un mundo. Puedes presionar y vas a elegir interpretación. Si estás en una tableta o un celular, vas a ver 3 puntos en la parte inferior o superior de su pantalla y puedes acceder a los canales de interpretación. Muchísimas gracias.
Okay, the following is the language instructions in Mandarin. 好，大家晚上好，欢迎你们来参加我们 Care for Community 的这一次的会议。我们将在会议中呢提供国语现场翻译。如果你想听国语的话呢，请单击 Zoom 屏幕右下角的翻译按钮。那您会看到一个地球的图标，然后请选择国语 Mandarin。那如果您是通过智能手机或者平板电脑进入 Zoom， 请通过单击更多或屏幕右下角的3个点来选择语言，选择语言翻译，然后选择 Mandarin 是国语，然后单击完成，这样就好了。谢谢。Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much. This is so beautiful. And thank you also to our ASL interpreters who are so fabulous. Please put some love in the chat for the interpretation team. Look at this trilingual community event on a Monday night. Gotta love it. Okay, now that we have our interpretation set up, we want to welcome all of you again to the Fair Share Business Tax Town Hall, organized by Care for Community, or C4C for short. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm Nicole. I'll be one of your facilitators this evening, along with Sherry Murphy. One last housekeeping item before we get started. If you have questions tonight, please let our panelists know by clicking on the button at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A and type your questions there. Our panelists will answer as many questions as they're able to. We're going to have a time for them to answer that Q&A live later in the event. So I want to start off by introducing Care for Community. C4C is a relatively new organization that grew out of the power and relationships created during Carroll Fife's 2020 City Council campaign, where community members were inspired and united by her platforms: housing as a human right, divesting from policing to invest in community, climate and environmental justice for all, and taxing corporate wealth to increase city revenue. You can read more about C4C by going to our website, oaklandc4c.org. And I'll pass it over to Sherry.
Thanks, Nicole. Electoral campaigns are powerful. With short-term, high-stakes outcomes, they galvanize organizers to go out into our communities to talk with thousands of our neighbors. We knock on doors and leave informational literature. We make phone calls and send text messages. We table at events and gather signatures, and we run social media campaigns. Elections represent rare peaks in awareness and engagement in the civic processes. And the energy surrounding them brings people together around the issues we care most about. Nicole, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. Thank you. I know I'm going to need another one of those reminders before we're done here tonight. So progressive electoral candidates often tell us while they're on the campaign trail that the fight's not over on election day. But usually the powerful movements that propel progressive candidates into office, they tend to go dormant in between election cycles. And so C4C is working to rebel against that trend by building a civic engagement machine that operates in District 3 52 weeks a year, every year, to advance a progressive political agenda in Oakland. In doing so, we hope to create a replicable model for increasing participation in local governance.
And we know that one elected official can't solve all the problems, and that City Hall is not where all problems can be solved. Using on-the-ground person-to-person tactics of electoral campaigns, C4C works with District 3 residents and neighborhood organizations to build sustained community engagements to ensure that real progressive policies are implemented.
C4C is a multiracial organization committed to organizing with all of the incredibly diverse constituencies in District 3. And because of the historical significance of the Black community in District 3, and because of the ongoing mass displacement and disenfranchisement of Black people in District 3, and because of our origin story in Carroll Fife's campaign for City Council, C4C is committed to following Black leadership and prioritizing the needs of the Black community. All of our programming is aligned with the Black New Deal and Community Ready Corps' Black Solidarity process, which is such a beautiful and inspiring document. You got to read more about it. It's at blacksolidarity.org. But tonight we're here to talk about a really exciting initiative, the Fair Share Business Tax. You may already know that Oakland's current flat business tax system is regressive. It increases wealth inequality because it imposes a disproportionate burden on small businesses with lower incomes while creating unfair tax breaks for billion-dollar corporations. In fiscal year 2019 through 2020, Oakland small businesses earned just 18% of taxable gross receipts citywide, but they paid 34%, twice their share of all business taxes. Larger corporations took in 82% of gross receipts citywide, yet paid far less than their share, only 66% of total business taxes. Let us know in the chat. Do you think that's fair? You think it's fair? Tell us how you feel about it.
So the Fair Share Business Tax Initiative will provide 20,000 small businesses with needed relief from gross receipts taxes as they weather the harsh challenges of this pandemic and its economic impacts. It would invite larger corporations to pay their fair share, which would raise tens of millions of dollars in additional annual revenue to expand essential city services to fix and clean our streets and address the problem of homelessness. This would be a big change for our city, and we're so glad you're all here tonight to learn more about this issue and get involved in the process to make Oakland's tax structure more fair and more equitable. And so it's with this tonight that I'm honored that Council President Nikki Bass and our very own District 3 Councilmember Carroll Fife are here tonight. Council President Bass, we want to hear from you first as the primary sponsor of this legislation.
Thank you so much, Minister Sherry, Nicole, Councilmember Fife. It's really terrific to be here, and props to Care for Community for providing this interpretation. This is how we should be doing our meetings. I want to just start off by saying I think it is so important to remember, what you just said, Nicole, the work that we do to build a progressive movement. It really starts on the ground with organizing, and certainly elections and elected leaders can carry those voices into City Hall, but we really need your organizing. Whether you are a resident or a small business owner, we need that strong organizing to happen on the ground to inform what we see as the problems, and also to hear what you see as the solutions. And so similar to Councilmember Fife, when I ran for office, I ran on a platform that also included redistribution of wealth, because we know that here in Oakland, we are one of the wealthiest regions in the entire country. We should have enough resources to service all of our residents and businesses, but this has not been the reality, with thousands of Oaklanders and small businesses struggling to make ends meet, and public services perpetually struggling with staffing and budget challenges. And we know that this has only gotten worse during the 3 years that we have been in this pandemic. So I'll just keep my remarks short and focus on the Fair Share Business Tax. This is something that I have been working on since 2020 with a coalition of small businesses, community organizations, and unions. We have all been learning a lot in terms of how we can make the system more fair and equitable. And because we have been lifting up this issue since 2020, through the work inside City Hall that I've been doing and the work out in the community that Councilmember Fife did before she entered office, and today working together with me on this legislation, I can clearly say that everyone in Oakland agrees that we need to update our business tax structure to make it more fair and equitable. And so this proposal is really focused on creating a progressive tiered structure with higher tax rates on businesses with higher revenue, where all businesses pay their fair share. And with that system in place, we will be able to raise tens of millions of dollars in improving and expanding critical city services. And those services are exactly what small businesses have told me and others that they need to have a fair shake here in Oakland. It's services that provide more business support and assistance, that keep our streets and sidewalks well maintained, that support our homeless residents. And so what we are working towards is an amended proposal. You know, we've heard a lot of feedback from many community members and small businesses and union leaders and rank and file union members. We are going to bring forward a proposal to the City Council that is an amended version of our legislation on May 26th at 10 a.m. And because we're focusing on small businesses this evening, I do want to share that the tax relief will be targeting the businesses that have been most impacted during the COVID-19 pandemic. That includes retailers, grocers, salons, and entertainment venues. I did see a question in the chat about other sectors, and I want to remind folks that we're focusing on those industries that have not seen any tax relief or any work on the tax structure literally in almost 2 decades. And so because we worked on cannabis tax rates in 2019, and we also worked on supporting small residential landlords in 2019. We are not focusing on those issues through this legislation. There's other ways we can continue working on those issues. We are focusing on the sectors that, again, have not had any attention to their tax structure in almost 2 decades. And so tonight, I'm really excited to hear from small businesses who are with us tonight in terms of what support and services you need, knowing that we are on the verge of putting on the ballot a measure that can raise tens of millions to support our small business community and our residents. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President, Council Member, President Bass. Now I'm proud to introduce our District 3 Councilmember Carroll Fife. Councilmember Fife, you ran a platform of systemic change over incremental reform. Please tell us why you're supporting this legislation.
Thank you for that question. And I also want to say just a major shout out to Care for Community for putting this together. We do talk about needing to build a machine that can continue the work of winning electoral campaigns after they end. And this is a beautiful testament to what that work looks like. So I'm deeply grateful for what you've been doing in the community with the grassroots organizing of small businesses. And I'm honored to be with you all tonight. I did not plan to wear the same colors as your logo, but it works. So that said, the reason I'm supporting this legislation is because I did run on a platform of taxing wealth. And I don't believe that it is fair or sustainable to continue to build on the city's revenues based on property owners. And I just feel like that's just an imbalanced way to do things when the income equality that we're seeing growing is allowing big businesses to get off scot-free without paying their fair share. We lost at the state level when we tried to reallocate funds based on some old tax legislation. We tried to make it fair at the state level. We came short, although we won in Oakland and Alameda County. Some of the other parts of the state just didn't see it necessary, and we've got to do something locally. So if anywhere in California, we can get something that's passed, that's progressive, that serves the people. It is right here in the city of Oakland, and that's what I'm committed to doing. Small businesses and homeowners should not bear the brunt of ensuring that the revenue for the city of Oakland is sufficient enough to take care of all of our growing and increasing needs. And that's why I wanted to be a part of this legislation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Fife,
Nicole? I'm sorry.
so much for being here and for all the work that you do. That's my council member in my district. Okay, so one of our missions at C4C is to demystify local government and to empower residents with the facts that they need to understand and think critically about city policies. So that's why we've asked Kristen Schumacher, who is a brilliant research specialist at IFPTE Local 21, representing our city workers, to give us some data about Oakland's current business tax structure, about the understaffing crisis that's impacting our city services, and about how the Fair Share Business Tax Initiative would impact our community. So Kristen, take it away. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Nicole. Let me pull up my slides here. All right, give me 1 second. Okay, everyone can see that okay, right? Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to go through a few things, which is to start with, why do we need to fix our tax system? What is wrong with Oakland's current tax system, and why are we having this conversation to begin with? So to start, I think Councilmember Bass, or Council President Bass, and Councilmember Fife covered so much of this more eloquently than I could, but city services are, I think a lot of folks know, city services are understaffed and underfunded. And this hurts everyone in the Oakland community. It hurts residents. It hurts the workers who work for the city. Like Nicole said, I work for one of the labor unions representing about 1,000 city workers. We hear about this problem from them every single day. And it also impacts businesses. We hear all the time from small businesses that are having to fill in the gaps in services because the city just can't be there when it should. And one of the reasons this whole conversation started was because for so many years, whenever we go into the budget process in Oakland, labor and community groups are in a position where we're trying to fight to stop cuts from happening instead of talking about how we grow services in Oakland and how we improve them for everyone. And this really started because we wanted to change that. We wanted to create actual structural change to revenue so that we are not in that position again. And Councilmember Bass also mentioned this, but the local business tax has not been updated for almost 2 decades. Just to give a contrast here, the city and county of San Francisco has revised their business tax about 5 times since 2016. So meanwhile, in Oakland, the city has changed so much, the needs have changed so much, and our tax structure has just fallen behind and needs to be modernized. In addition to that, thousands of small businesses really struggled during the pandemic. And on the flip side, some of the larger businesses in the city did quite well. And right now, because of having a flat tax, those who earn more aren't necessarily paying something that would reflect Oakland's values. And so that's the final point, which is that this is a city where there was incredibly strong support for schools and communities first. Oaklanders really want progressive tax systems that reflect their values. And this is something we can control locally. It's something we can do to make things more equal in our city. And that's part of why this is so important as well. If you're wondering what is the business tax and why are we looking at specifically reforming the business tax, one of the main reasons for this is that the business tax is one of the largest taxes in the general purpose fund, which is the discretionary fund of the city. This is the only fund in the city that can be used to support all general city services. And it has been dramatically underfunded, You know, I think also some of the priorities in the past for that money have also been not ones that reflect Oakland's values, but one of the issues that we consistently have is there is just not enough resources there to adequately fund things like public works, things like our housing programs, planning and building, all of these services that are incredibly understaffed in Oakland. It is also, the business tax is also one of the few taxes that we completely control here locally. Councilmember Fife mentioned property taxes, that Oakland supported schools and communities first, but we had to run a statewide campaign. This is basically doing something similar to that at the local level, where we can decide our own destiny and we don't have to rely on you know, what is happening in the rest of the state of California to make change. It is also one of the more reliable sources of revenue, which is really key when it comes to funding city services in a meaningful, ongoing way that we can consistently count on. Things like the real estate transfer tax, which we did reform somewhat recently, you know, which has made a huge difference. It's brought in a lot of resources for the general fund, but in some years there's a lot of money. In some years there's not as much money from the real estate transfer tax, because if we have a big building sell, we get a larger amount of transfer tax revenues. It's hard to meaningfully fund, for instance, public works crews, trash cleanup, our parks. It's hard to fund those on a really consistent, ongoing basis if we can't count on the money year to year. And the business tax is one of the more stable and consistent sources of revenue in the city that would allow us to do that. If you're wondering why we're doing this now, some folks had mentioned this before, but it has been a long road to get here. And I wanted to recap all of the different steps it took to build this sort of power and to get to the point where we are about to reform the city of Oakland's business tax. So this really started with the election of Councilmember Bass back in 2018. And then in the biannual budget process that happened in that next year, that's when this talk really started, of why are labor and community groups and groups of residents always fighting? We're always showing up to budget meetings, say, please don't cut these services, instead of, I want more investment in X, Y, and Z. And what can we do to change that? And that's when we started having this conversation that the business tax is so out of date and we've just done nothing about it so far. Then in 2020, when the pandemic was really hitting the city's budget, Councilmember Bass really championed business tax legislation at that time that would have cut taxes for thousands of small businesses in the middle of the pandemic, while bringing in more resources for city services. But we fell one vote short. And at that time, the Chamber of Commerce, some of the other large businesses in the community were opposed to that legislation, which is part of how we fell one vote short on council. But then shortly thereafter, Councilmember Fife was elected to city council and we flipped that seat. And we got one more vote we got one more council member who is in favor of creating a more fair and equitable tax system for Oakland. And this was also D3 residents speaking clearly about what they wanted to see in their city. So while we didn't get the legislation passed in 2020, what did end up happening was that council committed to take something to the ballot in 2022. And that in the interim, there would be a task force made up of primarily of business leaders that would meet and offer recommendations on the city's business tax. So throughout 2021, that process happened. That task force ultimately recommended the creation of a new and progressive tax system in order to help small businesses and fund city services for everyone. And that brings us to 2022, where now it's about deciding what we actually take to the ballot in the end. And we knew it was clear in the task force process and throughout these conversations that the best way to enter these talks and the negotiations over what a business tax is going to look like is for labor and community to begin circulating a citizen initiative so that we have leverage and we can kind of set the North Star version of what this policy could look like. So labor and community groups filed the Invest in Our Oakland initiative. The Chamber of Commerce also filed their own initiative as well. But after 4 years of building power, 4 years of these really key and important electoral victories, and organizing around this and making this part of the conversation since 2018, we are finally to the point where there's going to be something on the ballot in November of 2022. And something that is very different this time around is that the Chamber of Commerce and some of the larger businesses have been willing to come to the table, saying that they are willing to contribute more in order to strengthen city services for everyone, and in order to provide permanent tax relief to small businesses. Which, this doesn't happen by accident. It is only by organizing that something like that is possible. But that is something that is power that we really built over these past 4 years. So next I'm going to talk about, I believe Nicole shared some details about how the business tax currently works. Oops, sorry about that. But I'm going to share some details about our current tax system and the business community in Oakland. So, and just to start with, this data includes the industries that are impacted by this tax proposal. It does not include landlords or cannabis businesses, since those taxes have been more recently reformed, as Councilmember Bass mentioned. So this includes the other businesses that are part of that segment of our business tax that has not been updated in almost 20 years. So the vast majority of businesses in Oakland are small. And I mean the vast majority. Almost 89% of businesses make less than $1 million a year. And then the remaining chunk of businesses are mid-sized businesses. And then there's a segment of businesses that make quite a bit of money, that make 50 million plus. And it's about 0.2% of businesses that report gross receipts over 50 million in Oakland. And I should say, this is just the gross receipts that they report from their business activities just in Oakland. So these companies are often larger and often make more money than that when you look more holistically at what they do across the whole country. Under our current, so while there's the vast majority of businesses are small and make less than $1 million per year, they earn relatively little money compared to the top, to larger businesses in the city. So the top 11% of businesses in Oakland earn about 7 times the amount of the entire bottom 88% of businesses. And on the flip side of that, the way our tax structure is currently set up, they're not paying, small businesses and large businesses don't pay a proportional amount of taxes, or amount of taxes that is proportional to how much they earn. So the bottom 88% of businesses, the vast majority of businesses in the city, of the total amount of money that is made in Oakland by businesses, they make about 13% of it, but they pay 15% of the city's taxes, of the city's business taxes. For the largest businesses, for the top 0.2%, that's about the top 50 businesses in the city, they make almost 30% of the money. They make about 28% of all gross receipts in the city, but they pay proportionally a lower share of taxes. They pay only 25%. So this is exactly the type of inequity that we're trying to address, because obviously a business, if 52 businesses make, way billions more, they have a little bit more ability to pay. It's a little more comfortable for them to pay a bit more so that everyone can have better city services. So what could we do with a new tax structure? We could address these inequities. We could modernize the tax structure, make sure it fits the business community that we have in Oakland today. We can also provide permanent tax relief to some of the key businesses in Oakland that really make the community what it is, and also were really hurt by the pandemic, like small retailers, restaurants, grocers, theaters, salons. There's thousands of businesses in these categories, and we can use this moment to provide permanent tax relief to them. And then also, if we have new revenue for city services, that is something that we can use to actually finally increase and improve services in a meaningful way for decades and decades to come. So what could we fund with this revenue? Like I said at the beginning of this, I do work for one of the unions that represents city workers. And so one of our major priorities, one of the reasons we have been so involved in this, is because of the depth of understaffing problems in the city. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So right now, As of the most recent reports, there are over 734 vacant jobs in the city of Oakland. And, during the pandemic, a lot of employers struggled to recruit and retain staff. There was the Great Resignation, which I think a lot of people probably heard about in the news. But the thing with Oakland is this problem has been here for a while now. We actually had even more vacancies before the pandemic. We've just returned to our pre-pandemic vacancy level because the city did freeze some vacancies or eliminate some vacancies in prior years. So this problem has been there for a long time. Even in 2017, when things were were not quite as bad, the city still had over 400 vacant positions, which that is 400 jobs, 400 people that are supposed to be providing a service that residents do not get. And other cities are struggling to recruit and retain staff right now. This is a public sector-wide problem in many ways, but Oakland is unique in just the sheer depth of the problem. So this is some other cities and counties where I do budget research, where I work with our members. And the percentages on the right, the column on the right, are showing you the percentage of departments in the city that have at least 1 in 5 jobs vacant. 44% of departments in Oakland have reached that critical understaffing level of having at least 1 in 5 jobs empty. And that is unique. That is not normal across other public agencies. These are the departments that have that depth of understaffing, departments that have 18% plus vacancy rates. And you can see it's some of the departments that people are making calls for services from on the most frequent basis. It's things like public works, housing and community development, planning and building, transportation. The Department of Violence Prevention has had an extremely high vacancy rate for a long time. Workplace and Employment Standards is a relatively new department, but still has not been staffed. But also things like race and equity. We've never really been able to fully staff that department ever since its creation. So, and I also put this line here, this dotted line is showing you the statewide job opening rate during the middle of the pandemic. So when there were an abnormally large amount of job openings, the statewide job opening rate was 6.4%. So this is all to say that this is far beyond normal. And we have a problem that we need to structurally fix in the city. And that was just a 1-year highlight of departments that have very high vacancy rates. But also when you look back over time, these are the departments that for each of the past 4 years has had a vacancy rate of at least 10%. And so it is not just a problem that is incredibly severe right now. It is a problem that is incredibly persistent. Every single year, these departments have been understaffed for the past 4 years. And then this is the number of vacancies by department, just so you can see, because those are percentage based, so you can see the sort of scale of it. There are some departments that have as much as 120 jobs vacant in just one department. For public works, that's the case. But also, this is the vacancies for the police department. I'm actually just showing the civilian vacancies, not the sworn. The sworn vacancy rate is very low in the city. But for the police department, the non-sworn staff, the folks who work in like the crime lab and do things that don't require a badge and a gun, they've had extremely high levels of vacancies. Same with Department of Transportation, Planning and Building, and also Fire, Parks and Recreation, and Libraries. And so I just wanted to circle back to one thing, which is one of the other reasons that we are here is because this is something that that reform to our business tax, making it more progressive, making it a reflection of Oakland's values, is something that Oaklanders really want to see. Polling that we did a few years ago showed that it had a uniquely high level of support. 78% of Oakland residents supported reforming the business tax to make it more equitable. So we have the solutions that we need in order to fix things like underfunding and understaffing of city services. It is something that the Oakland community is hungry for. And hopefully this is the year that we finally actually do it. So I think that's it for my presentation, but I'll hand it back to our facilitators.
Kristen, thank you so much for an informative and an enlightening presentation. And now this is the portion where the participants get to ask the questions. And so we're going to go with this question. Signatures are being collected in Oakland for an initiative to change business taxes in Oakland. How is that initiative similar and or different to what you folks are proposing? Would like to answer that.
I can answer that. So there are several proposals to update the Oakland business tax. There is the proposal that myself and Councilmember Fife are putting forward. We've also had Council members Tao and Kalb join us. And there are two proposals that are out gathering signatures to be placed on the ballot. One of those proposals has been put forward by largely the business community and the Chamber of Commerce. Another one of those proposals out collecting signatures has been put forward by a coalition. I believe Kristen is a part of that coalition with her union, and you saw a picture on the first slide. It's called Invest in Our Oakland. And the original proposal that Councilmember Fife and I put forward back in March through council is very similar to that Invest in Our Oakland. And in fact, in our personal capacity, not as council members, we are supporting that proposal. And I think it's really important to share that there has been a lot of discussion about this proposal for literally years. And since Councilmember Fife and I put forward our proposal 2 months ago, we've been engaged in a lot of conversation, as have our new co-sponsors, Councilmembers Tao and Kalb. And so when we bring forward an amended piece of legislation to that meeting I mentioned earlier on May 26th to the full City Council, that amended piece of legislation is really going to pull together a lot of the feedback that we've gotten and will incorporate some changes to make sure that we are creating this more progressive structure, raising tens of millions for Oakland's revenue to provide city services, and also create more consensus about moving forward to place, hopefully and ideally, just one measure on the ballot.
Thank you. We'll stay with you, President Councilmember Bass, with asking another question. Are you also supporting change to progressive parcel tax for small homeowners?
So like I said earlier, we are focusing this piece of legislation on the industries that have not been updated, the tax rates on the industries that have not been updated in almost 2 decades. So we are not focusing on cannabis because the council did work in 2019 to update the cannabis business tax rates. We are also not focusing on residential or commercial rentals because similarly, the council did work to update those rates in 2019. And Minister Murphy, let me know if this is too much level of detail, but I do want to answer this question. So I might take a little while to explain some of this, but it seems like folks are interested in hearing. So just to give folks a little bit more information on what happened in 2019, Council did pass in 2019 a small landlord exemption and reduction to the residential business tax. And that went into effect for 10 years, starting January 1st, 2020. I'll go through it. This is a little bit technical, but I do think it's important information to know.
And if I may put you on pause, President, Councilmember, if you can make sure that you slow down so that everyone gets the information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm looking at my notes, so I may not see everyone's face. So thank you for verbally interrupting me. Feel free to verbally interrupt again if I'm going too fast. And it's also a little technical, so slow me down or ask me to repeat if needed for the interpretation.
Thank you.
So again, the small landlord exemption and reduction was passed in 2019. and went into effect the following January for 10 years. Council members Kalb, Kaplan, and Gallo worked on this, and it applies to a set of specific landlords. So first, if you own a single family home, a townhouse or condominium, and you offer no more than 2 rooms for rent, you're exempt from the business tax if you meet 4 qualifications. So first, that you live in that dwelling as your primary place of residence, and you've received a homeowner property tax exemption from the county. Second, that you've owned and lived there for 1 year prior to applying for the exemption. Third, your household income from all sources is no more than 150% of the area median income. And fourth, you don't have ownership interests in other residential property in the city. So again, if you're an owner of a single family home, a townhouse, or condominium that offers no more than 2 rooms for rent, and you meet those qualifications, you don't have to pay the business tax.
Thank you.
There's a little bit more.
There's a question.
Minister Sherry. So
Okay.
secondly, if you own a single family house, a townhouse, or condominium, you satisfy those 4 qualifications and you rent out no more than 3 rooms, then you only have to pay a third. You only have to pay the tax on a third of your gross receipts. And then finally, if you own a duplex or a single family home with 1 or 2 accessory dwelling units, you're exempt from the tax if you live in the unit, similar to those four qualifications I just laid out. And you also don't have other residential property. So again, I'm sorry, that's a little complicated and a lot to run through verbally. My team is going to work on putting something together to send out to folks who are interested to lay that out. And one thing that I think is very important is that Councilmember Fife and I have been talking to those of you who have expressed concern about this exemption and reduction. We want to make sure that everyone in Oakland knows about it and has the information they need to apply. And so we have requested an informational report to come to the June 28th Community and Economic Development Committee meeting. It's at 2 p.m. And so at that meeting, we'll hear some very detailed information from the administration about how they do outreach, how you apply, how this is being implemented so that we can improve that process. And that's also a more appropriate place where we can troubleshoot any issues with that process and consider whether there's more that council needs to do. And I'll just say one final thing is that generally what needs to go to the ballot to voters is tax increases. And because this measure creates a tiered structure where we are going to make sure that if you have higher gross receipts, you pay more in taxes, we are taking this to the ballot to ensure that all businesses, medium and larger businesses, are able to pay their share. And you'll see as we publish our new version of the legislation, it means that we are proposing to increase taxes for certain businesses. And that's why this particular change to the tax code has to go to voters.
If I may interrupt here, I just wanted to ask Council President Bass about the explanation that she just gave. Thank you so much. That was expressed very clearly, very succinctly. I know you mentioned bringing this information forward in a public meeting. Is that something that you're planning to do on any particular date? Or is there something you can share about making this more accessible so more people know about the exemption that was passed in 2019?
Yes, absolutely. Clearly, we will make this more public. So together with you, Councilmember Fife, in response to the conversations we've been having with small landlords, we did schedule, I believe, 2 weeks ago for a future date. So on Tuesday, June 28th at 2 p.m., we will have a committee hearing specifically on the small landlord exemption and reduction, so that we can hear from the administration how it's working, hear your concerns, problem solve. And that is where we can consider whether there's more the council needs to do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. There's a question in the chat box, and thank you. And I want to remind you also to make sure that you put your questions in the Q&A, because we want to make sure that we get your questions so we can address them. But there's a question here for either Councilmember Fife or President Councilmember Bass. And the question is, can you outline the major differences between the two proposals that are being considered?
Well, honestly, just you want my direct answer to that. We want one proposal to be considered, and that is the Bass Fife initiative moving forward. And that is the direction that we are going forward with, because this is new territory, and that with my introduction to the council and the diligent work and leadership of Council President Bass over these last few years, we have, as Kristen Schumacher said earlier, the Chamber of Commerce coming to the table to be a part of making sure that there is one proposal moving forward. And the fact that we have some of our friends and our labor allies and community organizations that have done amazing grassroots organizing, we feel confident that there will be one proposal. So I want to make it really clear that even though there's still signature gathering happening, we intend for there to be one proposal.
Thank you. Next question. What are the current suggested programs and/or applications of funds generated by the shift in tax rates? If you don't know now, what is the process you will put in place to determine what those applications will be?
Sherry, is that question in the chat? Because that was a lot.
Okay, it is.
Q&A.
So let's try to parse it. So what are the current suggested programs, if any, for the shift in tax rates?
Well, I will start, and I'll just share a few things, because I'm sure Council President Bass, as well as Kristen representing city workers, know, just as all of you all know, what services we need to see more support with. I'm not even going, well, let's just say that our streets need support, our streets need help. We know that we have critical issues around housing and homelessness. We have issues that need to be addressed with illegal dumping. So I'll just leave those things there, because those are things that are very important to me in District 3. And I will ask Council President Bass and Kristen to weigh in too about where they think these funds should go.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm happy to jump in here too. So, you know, one of the things that I think is really important is to recognize that small businesses have really been consistent in talking about the types of services that they need. In fact, there has been a small business task force going back to 2017 that made some recommendations. More recently, in 2021, there was an economic recovery task force that made Councilmember Fife alerted me to a resolution around co-ops and how the city could support co-ops. And one of the things that I think is really important is that we hear more from the small business community about how those recommendations cannot be put on a back burner, but actually can be acted upon as we're able to raise new revenue. So similar to creating a time to hear from the administration and constituents about the small landlord exemption, we also scheduled to that same meeting in June an informational report on how we can move forward those recommendations from the small business community. So, we certainly want you to come to the meeting on May 26th when the full council will hear this proposal and hopefully place it on the ballot. And then in June, we want you to come out again on the 28th at 2 p.m. because it's an opportunity to address the issues with small landlords and also the small business community. So some of the recommendations that have consistently come up from the small business community include creating a more robust small business assistance center. That center is only staffed, I believe, with 2 people, and they are really not able to provide the services that our small business needs. More permitting, for example, streamlining the permitting process is another thing that we hear. And then we also hear about marketing. Think about how much we all love Oakland. Imagine if we had a central place to go to tell you about different types of markets, different types of events, and just really were able to promote our small business community, especially our BIPOC small businesses. Those are the type of things that we've been hearing about consistently, and raising this revenue was an opportunity to take action and really put resources into those type of things.
So what are the rate changes you're asking for each group of businesses?
I can take a stab at that unless someone else wants to. So, as we've discussed, we are really at we're really at an exciting political moment where everyone agrees that we need to reform our business tax structure to make it progressive. And because of that, the proponents of the 2 competing ballot measures who were out collecting signatures have come to the table. One of our colleagues, Councilmember Tao, has actually been helping to facilitate those conversations. And so there are active negotiations happening right now to come to a set of agreements that will allow us to move forward with one ballot measure. I think that's incredibly positive. I think it's just really exciting that we're on the verge of having the level of consensus to move this forward. And as I mentioned earlier, what we want to do is reduce the rates for the businesses that have been most impacted by COVID. And so that has been small retailers and grocers, salons, as well as entertainment venues, for example. And then because we have a flat tax, we definitely think that there is, it's only fair to make sure that the medium and larger businesses pay their fair share. And so we'll be proposing that if you earn higher taxes, you'll pay more and multiple times more. We're developing this proposal this week. We're planning to publish it on Friday. So there's more to come, but definitely recognize that with a flat tax, it's not equitable. And so the idea is as you earn more, you pay more. And at the higher rates, it means multiple times more than you pay right now.
Okay, thank you. Great questions, everyone. Thank you all for your participation. I'll now and thank you, Councilmember Carroll Fife and President Councilmember Bass. And now we'll turn it back to Councilmember Fife.
Once again, I want to thank Council President Bass for this legislation that I know you were championing for quite some time. I'm proud to say that I have a vote in this process and moving it forward, and can be a deciding factor in this actually coming to fruition. So I'm incredibly honored to be a part of this process. I also want to say that I worked on a campaign in 2014 where we were discussing doing this very same thing. So we know that this is a persistent problem that needs to be addressed immediately in the city of Oakland. And what I will say today is that we need your help from everyone listening to this webinar today and the people who will come to meetings in the future, who will watch this recording, C4C. We need your consistent support and work on this effort. We've come a long way where we have all of the stakeholders that, have weighed in on this process through the Blue Ribbon Task Force, as well as other ways to be engaged, including the business improvement districts in my district that I had the honor of talking to and really listening to their concerns. Now we have an opportunity of everyone being at the same table, working together, and we still need you all to come out on the dates that Council President Bass just listed, May 16th at 10 a.m. And Council President Bass, you're gonna tweet those out so people can see them on social media, correct?
Yes, May 26th.
I'm sorry, May 26th and June 28th. Those are both very important dates at 10 a.m. for both, or the second one at 2. Either way, Council President Bass is going to tweet those out because we need people to call in, weigh in, email the council, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, because we are still organizing. C4C, that's what you all are about. And so we need you to continue to organize because we need this to pass. Once we put it forward, we need it to go to the ballot, and we need the residents of Oakland to be familiar with this legislation so they can support it. So the first steps are May 26th, letting your voice be heard, come and talk about it, talk about why this is important to you, why it's important to the city of Oakland. But that is my charge, that you all continue to show up in support of making it fair right here in the city of Oakland.
Thanks so much, Councilmember Fife. All right. Thanks everybody so much for coming out to this town hall tonight. We just have a few more announcements before we close out. If you live or work in District 3 and you want to help build democracy in your neighborhood, you should join our canvassing team, because we go out and we knock on doors and we talk to our neighbors every single week. Mondays, Tuesdays, and Saturdays. We also go out every other week on Thursdays. So there's many ways for you to get involved. It's a great way to get outside, to get to know your neighbors, and to put your political values into practice. Because we can talk about stuff all day, right? But if we don't take the actions, we don't see what we want to see. So you can sign up to volunteer with us at an upcoming shift at the link that's being posted in the chat right now. And in particular, we have a big mobilization coming up soon. I want to hear from you in the chat if you believe that housing is a human right. And I really want to hear from you in the chat if you want to see the city do more to get people off the streets. I hope I'm not alone in this. Hands up, right on, right on. So we hope that you'll join C4C for the Northgate Now campaign, which is to house 1,000 unhoused residents. The city of Oakland owns the North Gateway parcel, which is a remote location in West Oakland, formerly part of the Oakland Army Base. 2 years ago, City Council passed a resolution directing the city administration to immediately develop the site for emergency homeless interventions. But the city administration has not acted on this mandate in 2 years and has instead just held this site vacant. And that's a big problem that we have in Oakland. A lot of times our progressive council will pass policies and then somehow it doesn't get implemented. So that's why we got to organize, right? With over 4,000 people currently living on the streets of Oakland, which is a damn shame, 1,000-person site could dramatically impact how homelessness exists and is addressed in the city. So if you want to see Oakland use these public lands to house 1,000 people, come out to our campaign kickoff. It's going to be Saturday, May 28th at Mosswood Park at 9:30 a.m. We'll provide the coffee, the breakfast, and the training, and then we'll all hit the streets together to talk to our neighbors and build the movement to end homelessness in Oakland. And the event link is going to get posted in the chat. We also have social media. So if you want to stay up to date with the organizing we're doing in District 3, follow us. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those handles are also going in the chat. Thanks, everybody. And let me pass it to Sherry.
Thank you, Nicole. And we have a Moms for Housing Mayoral Candidate Forum. As you may already know, it's an election year and a very important one for Oakland. So we'll be voting in a new mayor. And the mayor has a lot of power in the city and will have a huge impact on the issues like housing and public safety and racial equity. C4C is co-hosting a free, nonpartisan mayoral candidate forum with Moms for Housing on Saturday, June 18th from 3 to 5 p.m. on Zoom. So come hear from Oakland mayoral candidates on the issues impacting your family and your neighborhood. You can register to attend this event at the link being posted in the chat room right now. Again, on behalf of C4C, we want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and we hope to see you again very soon. Have a good evening.